Opinions expressed on this radio program do not necessarily reflect the views of this radio station.
My friends and I always tune into the Todd Levitt Law Show. Todd is entertaining, informative, and always delivers the goods.
Todd might not tell you what you want to hear, but he's going to tell you what you need to hear. And all you got to do is listen.
Hold on, Todd. Don't let go. It's time for the Todd L. Levitt Law Show.
Welcome to the Todd L. Levitt Marijuana Law Podcast. Good morning, good evening, and good night. I'm yours truly, attorney Todd L. Levitt, broadcasting and podcasting in the middle of a mitten on a beautiful Memorial Day weekend in the middle of a green nutrient field with my good friend Craig Russell, the muscle, in the mothership, the Black Diamond Group mothership, taking off from Traverse City and landing in some other nutrient field. Clones, phones, and drones. Clones, and clones. How you doing, Craig?
I'm doing good, man. Getting ready to go to Coleman. The Coleman Veterans Memorial United by Sacrifice show is later on today. Quiet Riot and Warrant. Perfect for a holiday weekend in Coleman. You've been to the Coleman Veterans Memorial before, have you not?
Oh, you know it, and they do such a great job out there in Coleman, all the volunteers and whatnot. It raises a lot of money for all the vets and all the memorials they have there. It's an incredible place.
Great show. It's Quiet Riot and Warrant live on stage. Quiet Riot goes on about 5:30, and then Warrant's on about, I think, 7 o'clock, around that neighborhood. It's $30 at the door if you want to come on out for it. Obviously, if you're hearing this in the podcast, you can't come out on it if you're, say, like in Minnesota or California or Texas. But if you're listening to it on 98.5, it's the show is later on today, so we'll see you out there. Should be a good time.
Big shout out to all our listeners in California, by the way. Outside of Michigan right now, California is coming in second in the amount of downloads and listeners. We are now on iHeartRadio.
Oh, wow.
In addition to all the other podcast platforms. I still don't have a voice, obviously. And you know something interesting, Craig? We opened up the show with my all-time favorite group, one of them at least top 5. That's for Gavin. Motley Crue, same old situation. Yep. And I'm told that they're in the lead right now for votes online somewhere to enter into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Oh, really?
It's a shame that they haven't already been inducted.
I would totally agree with that. Let's be real honest. You're talking about rock and roll. You're talking about rock music. Motley Crue was at probably one time for at least 10 years one of the biggest rock bands in the world. They easily should be in the Hall of Fame without a problem.
Absolutely. And we have a huge show for the listeners.
Big show.
Attorney Scott Roberts is going to be on the show from ScottRobertsLaw.com. Scott is a good friend of mine and yours and of the show. Scott was at the 420 Canna Hemp Expo, and he's going to be talking about everything cannabis and marijuana, not just in the state of Michigan, but beyond. And one of his specialties is not only assisting individuals, corporations, in getting approved for various licenses, but we're going to be talking about micro grows.
Ooh.
Micro grows. So that's coming up in the show of shows here in the mothership. But Craig,
Todd,
before we start the show, I just want to say to everyone out there, I hope you're enjoying the weekend. Do not drink and drive. If you're on ORVs, we talked about it last week, keep an eye out for one another.
Right.
And especially watch out for all of our loved ones who are on their motorcycles this weekend. Biker Bob and all our friends and loved ones who are out there just shredding the gnar up and down the highways and the backcountry roads on their cycles. Keep a safe distance from all the motorcyclists and also all the road bikers who are out there just getting some exercise, enjoying the outdoors.
Well, our UPS bike night started this past week. That tells you where we are in the spring and early summer now. It's now Memorial Day weekend, the unofficial kickoff of summer here in Michigan. But on top of it, bike nights are back in full effect. So yes, be careful. Don't drink and drive. And remember the reason why you have a day off tomorrow. Remember the reason for it. It's Memorial Day. We memorialize the people who fought for this country. Of course, we love our vets. We love people in the armed forces. Veterans Day are for veterans who are living, who served but are still with us. Armed Forces Day are for people who are serving. Memorial Day is to remember those who lost their lives, so you and I can have our barbecues this weekend, and you and I can have our weekend off and have our holiday and go see Warrant and Quiet Riot and download a show and every other thing that makes this the greatest country in the world. Remember that.
Ditto. Well said. There's nothing else to add to that. We love our veterans and all those who have sacrificed for us, including their families and loved ones as well. But Craig, we got Scott Roberts. Might as well. No one wants to hear us talk, right?
No kidding.
I mean, we talk enough. I know.
Yeah.
Before we bring Attorney Scott Roberts on the show, obviously I've had issues with my voice the last couple of weeks for whatever reason. But I realized I don't have any other skills. My skill is I talk. I can't build anything. I don't know anything about electrical things. I cannot weld. I can't do anything in regards to automotive.
You're not good with computers.
I have one skill, and that is to use my voice. So, right now I'm still doing well.
It's frustrating. It's frustrating because that's all you know. Trust me, man. What do you think my realization of my life has been? I'm 49. And probably for a good 40
thought you were 78.
I know you did. For about 40 years of that, I've been using my voice. And I always sit there. Every once in a while, I'll have a nightmare where I can't talk. My voice is gone. And I don't know what to do. What would I do? What would I do with my life? What would you do with your life if you can't talk?
I would just, I don't know, write things down.
I would be going to the old DJ's home, and that would pretty much be it. I'd be walking around in a cane and just bemoaning how I can't talk anymore.
And for those just tuning in for the first time, I'm attorney Todd L. Levitt, criminal defense attorney out of Mount Pleasant, Michigan, going all the way north over the bridge to the great state of Superior, specializing in everything criminal defense, mostly alcohol and drug-related cases, specializing in driver's license restoration. I have restored thousands and thousands of men and women back to their original licensing so they can have freedom to do what they need to do every day to support their families. Also, we do take calls, by the way, Craig, for cases where individuals are injured in automobile, truck, motorcycle, bike accidents, dog bites, etc. We work very closely with attorney John Marco, who's going to be coming back on the show. So if you're listening to the show for the first time, feel free to give us a call, 989-772-6000. Very rarely, if at all, do we ever give out our phone number like that. But Johnny Marco is a great attorney, and if you happen to be someone that is injured, give me a call, and I'll put you in touch with his cell number.
Todd Levitt Law Show at gmail.com if you want to email as well. You can do that. Should we bring Scott Roberts on? Get him on the show?
Let's bring Scotty Roberts on.
We are unmuting Scotty Roberts, and here he is. Scott Roberts, welcome to the Todd L. Levitt Law Show. Yay!
Thanks. Happy to be here.
Glad you are here. You've been listening to this nonsense on your earbuds. What have you thought of the show so far?
It's interesting.
It's really a show about nothing. It's in the old Seinfeld, Larry David mold of let's just turn on the mics and get in the mothership and just talk about whatever comes into our noggins. But we have you on the show, so we're stoked about that today.
Awesome.
Scott, are you a big Motley Crue fan, Scott? What's your musical taste all about?
Actually, this Memorial Day weekend, I'm more of a movement guy.
Okay,
I like the techno in the house, so that's where I'll be. But I'm sure Motley Crue will put on a good show.
Well, that's cool. Hey, coming up, we will talk more about, Scott, what you specialize in. Tell everybody how they can get a hold of you and a little bit about you right now.
Sure. So I'm a cannabis business attorney. So I right now help mostly medical marijuana cannabis companies. We're very excited about the rec coming into play. Looking forward to those rules, and anyone who wants more information, my website is scottrobertslaw.com, and then we also have another website for the micro businesses, which hopefully we'll talk about in a bit, and that is marijuanamicrobusinesses.com.
Of course, we're going to talk about it in a bit. We're going to talk about all this stuff. We've got nothing but time, Scott. Nothing but time.
Scott was also one of our speakers and exhibitors at the 420 Canna Hemp Expo, and by the way, this time next year on 4/18/2020, we will be returning to the Soaring Eagle Casino and Resort for another huge 420 Canna Hemp Expo, so we're looking forward to that. Scott, your website is scottrobertslaw.com. You're the managing partner. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Are you from the state of Michigan, and where'd you go to undergrad?
Yeah, so I grew up here in Michigan. I did go out of state for undergrad. I went to undergrad in Washington University in St. Louis, then went to law school at University of Miami. Then in 2010, I made my way back to Michigan and have been practicing here in the state of Michigan ever since.
And Scott, I know you're passionate about microgrows as well as every other facet of the cannabis industry as an attorney in a law firm that represents individuals and corporations. But when we come back from break, we want to inform the listeners and educate them as to what a microgrow is and what they need to do if they're interested in launching a microgrow.
And we will do that. We will continue on with Attorney Scott Roberts in just a minute on the Todd L. Levitt Law Show when we come back. The Todd L. Levitt Law Show thanks you for listening to our podcast. If you have a business you think people would want to hear about, the Todd L. Levitt Law Show accepts advertising. We can promote your business to a very specialized, targeted audience. Any size commitment and any budget. Email toddlevittlawshow@gmail.com for more information about sponsoring and advertising on the Todd L. Levitt Law Show podcast.
Welcome back to the Todd L. Levitt Law Show, broadcasting and podcasting on Memorial Day weekend. Without a Voice with my good friend Craig Russell the Muscle and special guest attorney Scott F. Roberts in the Mothership. Scott, we are so happy to have you on the show. How's your weekend going so far?
Weekend's going great. I'm excited for Memorial Day, maybe take a day or two off, which I haven't done in a while, so that's always great.
We're going to talk about microgrows, but obviously, you're the managing partner of your law firm. What type of matters does your firm handle?
So what we do is we really focus on the business aspects of cannabis. So we don't do any of the criminal matters. We leave that to attorneys like Todd. What we do is we help people start businesses and enter the Michigan medical marijuana market, and hopefully very soon help businesses enter the Michigan recreational marijuana market as well. So that's really our focus, is on cannabis business, and that's pretty much all we do.
So my question for you is, and I know the answer, but this is for the listeners, if you're interested in obtaining a rec license, did you first have to be licensed under the current licensing rules and regulations that are in place as you and I speak on this show?
So the answer to that is yes and no. The general rule is you do. You first have to have a MMFLA license for the first 2 years of the program. However, there are two very important exceptions to that. One of them is the Class A grow, which is a 100-plant grow under the recreational law. And the second, and this is the one we're very excited about over here, is the micro business license. So that's a license that allows you to grow 150 plants, process it, and sell direct to the consumer, all under one license. And one of the few licenses that you don't first have to go through the MMFLA licensing process and get an MMFLA license.
So can you explain what the acronym is that you're referring to on the MFLA?
Yeah, of course. Sometimes I forget, not everyone speaks that language. So the MMFLA is the Medical Marijuana Facilities Licensing Act. And that's the act that allows for the dispensaries, or provisioning centers as they call it under the act, that you're seeing kind of popping up throughout the state. That was passed in 2016, and that is kind of what all the cannabis businesses are currently working under. As most of the listeners probably know, in 2018, the voters passed the MRTMA, the Michigan Regulation and Taxation of Marijuana Act. And what that does is create a recreational marijuana market. And right now, we are currently waiting on the rules for that, because what was passed was a statute. And with every statute of that nature, there has to be rules that kind of fill in the blanks. And we're currently waiting on those. We were told by the director to expect them sometime next month in June. So we hope to get those very soon and, start the process for these businesses.
So just to recap, are you saying that if there's a listener out there who wishes to obtain a micro grow license, 150 plants, they can grow, process it, and sell it all in the same physical location? Does it all have to be grown, processed, and sold at the same brick and mortar location, or can it be grown and processed off-site and then sold at a brick and mortar location?
So that's a great question, and actually a question we don't quite have the answer to yet. And that's the sort of question that's going to be answered hopefully by the rules when they come out next month. That's something where the statute doesn't require everything to be done in one location. It only requires all the cultivation and the processing to be done in one location. So the statute is silent on whether or not you also have to sell out of that location. And we expect that issue to be addressed next month when the rules come out.
Will the micro grow licensee be required to send all their product to the Michigan testing facilities as currently required under the statutes? We are under the Michigan Medical Marijuana Facilities Licensing Act.
We do believe so. Right now we don't have the rules for testing under the rec law, and we don't know if they're going to be the same through all the license types or maybe slightly less stringent for the micro businesses. My thought will be they'll probably be the same. But, that's another question. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to say, let's wait a month and then I'll be able to answer it.
If you're just tuning in, we're talking with attorney Scott Roberts from scottrobertslaw.com. You can check out Scott. We'll give out his phone number, 248-234-4060. That's his office, 248-234-4060. We'll give that out throughout the show. If you're looking for an attorney and who is surrounded by other attorneys that work with Mr. Roberts and his firm, and you're interested in getting licensed in the state of Michigan for one of the multiple licensees that are available, make sure you give Scott a call. We're talking about micro grows right now, right, Scott? So, and what about the background checks and all the pre-approval? Is an individual going to have to go through the same pre-approval process to get a micro grow license?
So the answer to that is no. They're not going to have to go through the same stringent MMFLA process. While we don't know the specifics of the application yet, I can tell you what we do know. And that is the MRA, the Marijuana Regulatory Agency here in Michigan, they have 90 days from when they receive an application to approve it or deny it. And that's, a big difference from what we're seeing under the MMFLA. Just this week we had an application pre-qualified that was submitted close to a year ago. So the process there has been very long and drawn out, but under the MRTMA, the licenses have to be approved or denied within 90 days. And if they're not approved and denied within 90 days, then they're considered approved. So we do know that it's going to be a lot more of a streamlined process, and we do anticipate that the licenses application for the micro business is going to be a little less intensive as far as the financial and the background check portions. However, the details of what they're specifically going to require are still kind of up in the air, and we may not get that till the end of the summer.
But here's the catch-all right here, what I'm about to say. The listener out there lives in Houghton Lake, Michigan, one of our main listening areas, right down from the Black Diamond Group mothership studio there. And someone is listening to Houghton Lake or up in Gaylord or Grayling or Lake or Mount Pleasant, Clare, Gladwin, any of the, Beaverton. And they're interested in a micro grow. The local township or community in which they reside in, they still have to have an ordinance allowing for this, correct? I mean, they just can't say, okay, I live in Houghton Lake. Houghton Lake has not necessarily opted in and allowing for these businesses or licenses, but they can't just go and apply for a microgrow license to the state if the local community living doesn't allow for it. Am I correct?
You are correct. And that's why one of the first things we tell micro business clients when they come in, when they ask us, what can we do in the interim while we wait for the rules and wait for the application, is we say, start talking to your municipalities in your area. Because a lot of these municipalities, when they find out about this, they're actually really excited about it for a couple different reasons. First off, it's a money issue. The way the excise tax is split up, and there's a 10% tax on all recreational marijuana sales, part of that goes to the municipalities. And the way that's divvied up is by the number of micro businesses and dispensaries in that municipality. So a municipality is, very heavily incentivized from an economic perspective to allow micro businesses in their municipality, and quite frankly, to allow a lot of them.
Scott, go ahead and give out your website and your phone number if listeners out there are interested in contacting you for representation.
Yeah, so our main website is scottrobertslaw.com, and our office number is 248-234-4060. You can also email me directly at scott@scottrobertslaw.com. We are, like I said, very, very interested in the microbusiness aspect, which is why we created a separate website just for micro businesses that we post a lot of free information on for people who are interested. And that website is marijuanamicrobusinesses.com.
Scott, now I have a couple of questions for you. We do have to take a break in a second, but think about this before we go to break. I'm going to ask you to put on your to pull out your crystal ball and kind of look a little bit into the future, because of course, not only are we a radio show in Michigan, but we're a podcast. You hear it all over the world. We're in 36 different countries. Every state in the union downloads this show. And of course, a lot of those states have their own medical and recreational marijuana laws. I want to kind of pick your brain a little bit about some of the things happening in other places and see how that relates and or how it could translate into what's going to happen in Michigan. But we do have to take a break on the Todd L. Levitt Law Show. We will be right back. The Todd L. Levitt Law Show thanks you for listening to our podcast. If you have a business you think people would want to hear about, the Todd L. Levitt Law Show accepts advertising. We can promote your business to a very specialized, targeted audience. Any size commitment and any budget. Email toddlevittlawshow@gmail.com for more information about sponsoring and advertising on the Todd L. Levitt Law Show podcast.
Welcome back to the Todd L. Levitt Law Show, broadcasting and podcasting, coming back strong with Motley Crue, same old situation. And that goes out to everyone that watches The Voice and American Idol because, come on. I'm just going to say, really, I was watching Game of Thrones and somebody in the other room at my house was watching American Idol, and I just kept turning the TV up louder and louder, guys. I had the bigger TV with surround sound, so during the last episode of Game of Thrones, I destroyed American Idol, and I'm not a fan because I'm a hardcore thrasher rocker, and especially today, Craig, at the Memorial, Coleman Memorial out there, there's some great groups playing.
Well, yeah, Warrant and Quiet Riot, a couple of real hard rock bands. Not too many Motley Crues and Warrants and Quiet Riots get sung on American Idol or The Voice or anything like that. Most of these people are doing country.
Yeah, they do all those
pop,
Disney songs.
Yeah.
And this week we're going to have Disney songs on, and next week we're going to be having our contestants sing Celine Dion songs and Anne Murray, for goodness sakes.
Not a lot of Motley Crue, same old situation on The Voice. Just saying. But Attorney Scott Roberts is in the house. Scott, thank you for coming on. Of course, you were at the 420 Can-A-Hemp Expo. What did you talk about at the expo? I didn't get a chance to duck into one of the rooms when you were talking. What did you end up talking about?
So my presentation was really just all about the microbusiness.
Okay.
And, we talked about some of the legal aspects of it that we know. And, what we actually focused a good chunk of our presentation on is on all the different business models that you could use with this license type. We talked about potentially doing essentially a microbusiness dispensary, a microbusiness delivery service, a microbusiness cannabis lounge or cannabis coffee shop like you see in Amsterdam.
Okay.
As well as a lot of different kind of cool ancillary models that may work in certain places. The same way you have, a winery that, has tours and allows people to, taste the wines that they produce. You can do the same thing with a microbusiness. We've kind of internally called that the taste and tour business model.
Okay.
And then, you can pretty much add a microbusiness depending on your municipality to any business model that kind of currently has alcohol. So, you see these painting with a twist places, which is, essentially an art studio and an art lesson with copious amounts of wine involved. And, I could see something similar with a marijuana microbusiness where, instead of alcohol, you replace it with marijuana. And honestly, that sounds a lot more fun to me.
I was going to say that's interesting because that is exactly where I was going to lead the questions into, because that was one of the things I was going to do. I was going to have you put on your crystal ball. Let's look 10 years into the future. How do you see this playing out in Michigan? Do you see there being major dispensaries owned by big corporations, even the big tobacco companies getting into the marijuana business? Do you see this being a really, really mix of that and much smaller, these micro grow businesses? And also, could you see like the corner liquor store? Could you see them in the back growing their own product there, selling it right along with whiskey and vodka, all under the same roof, kind of doing that kind of thing? Or is it going to be more places are going to be in their own shops and that's all they're really going to sell is cannabis?
I think it's going to be the second one. What you kind of see with industries like this is they start to get entrenched. And then when they are entrenched, they start to put up protective barriers. So what I would think would happen is, once the medical and recreational industries here in Michigan really get going and people make a lot of money and they start donating to politicians, that you're going to see, these things really start to harden, kind of like what you see with car dealerships where, there are protective legislation in each state that kind of requires everything to go through a car dealership. I see that kind of playing out similarly here in Michigan and a lot of other states.
And because that makes me wonder, because then this leads to my next question, because in places like in Oregon, they've got such an explosion of cannabis businesses. Oregon's not a very big state. I think there's only about 4 million people there. They've got to the point where they've got such an oversupply that some places give it away. Some places are charging 10 cents for an ounce. I mean, it's gotten so to the point of where there's way so much more supply than there is demand that it's really lowering the market. Is that going to happen in Michigan, or is there enough people for the demand, or is there a limit of how many business licenses and how many microgrows can happen in a community or in the state in general?
So all the limits are really placed on the municipal level at the moment. So, for the state, there are no limits. And I think that is a risk coming into Michigan, is that there could be an oversupply in a couple years, like you see in Oregon. Hopefully it won't be as bad as it is in Oregon. And some of the statistics I've seen on that are just insane, where they produce, 5 times more marijuana than they can possibly consume in a year. And that's obviously not sustainable.
Sure.
I will say, I've heard some talk. You hear lobbyists chatter back and forth, and there's been some talk about finding some ways to limit that to try to prevent from what happened in Oregon from happening in Michigan. But I think that's going to be really tough for the state to do.
Scott, the big concern that I hear all the time is from the caregivers. What's going to happen to the caregivers in the state of Michigan?
So I think caregivers are going to have to make a decision because they are slowly but surely kind of getting taken out of the market. And, it's not something that I don't think will necessarily happen overnight, but you've already seen the state now prevent caregivers from selling direct to the dispensaries. They can only sell to licensed growers and processors. But then what you're going to see pretty soon is that they're going to be prevented from selling from the licensed growers and processors. And then
but here's my issue with all that. Let me just jump in and say this. As a defense attorney, caregivers in the first place back in 2008, as I interpreted the statutes, were not allowed to sell to the dispensaries. And then all of a sudden, I represented individuals who were caught driving up and down the ditch on the way to certain dispensaries selling overages. And all of a sudden, the state spends all this money and energy arresting these individuals and putting them through hell, them and their families, and then now there's a complete turnaround whereby the state was allowing caregivers to supply the dispensaries and turning the other way. I have a problem with that because what about all the men and women that I came in contact with that got jacked up in the system or pulled over on the highway? Because my understanding, and Scott, tell me if I'm wrong, under the Michigan Medical Marijuana Act, you could sell to your 5 patients, and you could be a patient yourself, 72 plants, 2.5 ounces each. But your overages were supposed to be destroyed. You couldn't take the overages and sell them down the highway to a dispensary.
Yeah, that's correct. Over the years, the Michigan, regulatory agencies and the state police, less so the state police, have kind of taken a more relaxed view of the caregiver law. Almost out of necessity because the market is there and, pretending it's not isn't really helpful to anyone. But now what you're seeing is now that there is an alternative, especially an alternative that the state collects tax money on, I think you're going to start seeing, it's all about the money in this industry, unfortunately. But what you're going to see is, all the state has to do now is, start enforcing the laws that are already on the books. So It doesn't really even need a big change. All that really needs to happen is the state to say, hey, this law that we've kind of not really enforced and kind of condoned certain behavior under, we're going to start enforcing that. And that's going to put the caregivers in a bind because
it's too bad because the caregivers are the ones that supplied all the medicine. They're the ones that fought the good fight. They're the ones that have been arrested. Their constitutional rights just trampled on, and just like anything else, they get shoved aside. But it's just too bad. It really is. We're talking with attorney Scott Roberts. You can get a hold of Scott at 248-234-4060, 248-234-4060, scottrobertslaw.com. You also have a microgrow website. What is that website, Scott?
marijuanamicrobusinesses.com.
marijuanamicrobusinesses.com. Scott was at the 420 Canna Expo. We hope he comes back next year. We have one more segment with attorney Scott Roberts. Scott, let's break it down once again, back to what the listeners are interested in, and that is I want to get a license to launch one of these 150 plant microgrows in my community. First question is, can they contact you, and will your firm represent them in approaching their municipalities to advocate for them to amend their current ordinances or to opt in? Can a community by itself just allow for micro grows whereby they haven't allowed for any other types of licenses at this point?
Yeah, community is definitely allowed to do that. We haven't seen it yet, but maybe we'll see it sometime in the future. Well, we don't really engage in lobbying ourselves. What we often do is we kind of put our clients in the best position to be their own lobbyists. So we'll provide them talking points, we'll provide them information and fact sheets. Sometimes we will go to the city meetings or the township meetings as well. But a lot of what we do is really helping people to help themselves. And we found a lot of the times our clients end up being their best lobbyists. There are lobbying firms out there that cost a lot of money, $5,000, $10,000 a month, some of them. Wow. And, we found that a lot of the times the clients themselves are just as effective. So what we try to do is kind of put the clients in the best place possible to lobby themselves and lobby the municipalities themselves. And we've had clients that have been successful in doing that.
will you assist the client in providing them with language that the township can then adopt in their ordinance? So let's say you have a client in, again, Indian River, Michigan, a great community to the north, and they contact Attorney Scott Roberts at scottrobertslaw.com and says, Attorney Roberts, my community wants to opt in, but their city attorney needs some assistance in the language that has to go into their ordinance. Now, I know as an attorney all these answers. I mean, these townships have their own association. They have an attorney and attorneys. So, and a lot of these communities have looked at other townships and their ordinances and adopting language. But I'm just trying to take the client through the process of what you'll provide for them.
Yeah, that is something we can do. What we find is, for the most part, the municipalities just copy other municipalities' language, and then that just happens over and over and over again. Sometimes that's good, sometimes it's not. And, sometimes what we can do is, help suggest changes. So what will generally happen is a municipality will put out a draft ordinance, and it's, released to the public, but it's not voted on and it's not yet finalized. So we can help, the client make changes or suggest changes that kind of tweak it in a way that would be more favorable to them and, their potential business.
And then my next question is, in that community with these micro grows, this is, the rules and regulations have yet to be released, as you said earlier in the show. Are these going to, again, the local community has to deal with zoning. So are you going to be allowed to just, if you have a house that sits on a major road, like 55 or 66 or 61, or does this have to be in a business zoned section of the community?
So that is going to depend on the municipality. Right now under the MMFLA, or the medical law, you can't actually have a grow anywhere other than in industrially zoned, agriculturally zoned, or unzoned properties. That limitation is not in the rec law, but I could definitely see something being passed as far as the state level rules on that. But I also think, just kind of more from a practical perspective, you're not going to see a lot of municipalities wanting these businesses in residentially zoned areas.
Sure. I thought I'd ask that for
it's just like a liquor store, where you're not going to see a liquor store in essentially a residentially zoned area or house. They're going to be in commercially zoned areas. And what you see a lot of the times with these municipalities is they kind of already know where they want to put them. Maybe it's on the sketchy side of town, or maybe it's on the main thoroughfare, or maybe it's just kind of tucked away in an industrial park. But a lot of times the city officials kind of have a general idea of where they want these to be, and then they kind of draft the zoning ordinances around that.
And let's face it, and people are going to find it if they want to find it. They're going to know. They're going to figure out where it is. That's another question, and maybe we can get to that in the last segment of the show. We do have to take a break. Attorney Scott Roberts is with us. It's the Todd L. Levitt Law Show. We'll be right back. The Todd L. Levitt Law Show thanks you for listening to our podcast. If you have a business you think people would want to hear about, the Todd L. Levitt Law Show accepts advertising. We can promote your business to a very specialized, targeted audience. Any size commitment and any budget. Email toddlevittlawshow@gmail.com for more information about sponsoring and advertising on the Todd L. Levitt Law Show podcast. Welcome back to the Todd L. Levitt Law Show, joined in the mothership with my good friend, the handsome and talented Craig Russell, the Muscle.
and the enormously talented and handsome attorney Scott Roberts of ScottRobertsLaw.com. And I'm going to give out his phone number, 248-234-4060, 248-234-4060. We're talking about microgrows and other areas of the law. One quick question here, and I know Craig has a question for you. Are you going to see some of the dispensary owners who have spent millions and millions of dollars to get into these communities who are now getting a license and opening up? Are they going to take issue with all of a sudden now these microgrows pop up and it requires a lot less money and investment?
I definitely think you are. There are these dispensary deals, because we do a lot of them for our clients, both buying and selling. There are millions and millions of dollars. We've worked some that are $4 and $5 million just for a single dispensary. And when you have an investment of that size, and then you have someone essentially opening up down the street for a tenth of what you just invested into your dispensary, I think that's going to cause a lot of people to get very irritated. And I think you're going to see is a lot of the current dispensary owners are going to be the people actually lobbying against the micro businesses. It's not going to be so much as the outraged members of the community that think marijuana is the devil's lettuce. You're probably going to get a lot of people who just invested several millions of dollars into a dispensary, thinking, here I am, I have a monopoly now, or me and the 3 other dispensaries that are allowed have a monopoly. And then you can get these micro businesses that can come in, start up and be just as successful, if not more successful as them, but with a fraction of the investment. So I do think it's going to cause a lot of acrimony.
Well, and there's a question, because we were getting back to what we were talking about before. Do you think it's possible, much like liquor licenses based on the population of an area, there could be a limit of recreational marijuana license or even microgrow licenses based on the population of an area to continue to keep it competitive?
So I don't see that happening, just because of the way the kind of state structure is already set up. The municipalities have the ability to say how many they want in their municipality. And, you get places like Bay City, which have allowed a ton. And, to be honest with you, those businesses up there that are dispensaries are hurting because of it. And then you get other cities like, City of Warren, where we've been working on quite a bit lately. And, you'll have 10 for a city that has more than 100,000 people. So, that sort of thing, the law gives the municipalities the ability to say, we want 1, we want 10, we want 100. And I don't see the municipalities giving up that power.
Because there's money.
Yeah,
there's money involved.
Well, what happens next, Scott? Take us through the process with these microgrows. What's happening next?
So, right now we're waiting on the rules. And I can tell you, it's not just us potential business owners that are waiting on the rules. The municipalities are waiting on the rules too. They are, for the most part, they've been watching this very closely. They're very interested. But at the same time, they want to see what the rules of the road are before they, dive in head first. So we've been told by Director Brisboe that the rules are going to come out in June. He was pretty firm on that, though he did say maybe July. But he did say June. And then he also said he expects the first license applications to be accepted or, put out in about 90 days after that. So that brings us into kind of the September time frame.
You talk about recreational licenses?
Yeah, we're talking about micro business licenses. So that could also apply generally to all rec licenses.
Okay.
Though there has been some talk about maybe phasing in and only, say allowing a couple different licenses in September and then different licenses in October and then December, so on and so forth. So we don't know if they're all going to kind of come out together or if the department's going to phase those in. So once that application comes out and you apply, you're going to first have to have your municipal approval. And we, hopefully that starts really picking up this summer. And once you have that municipal approval and you've submitted your application, you'll have 90 days for the state to review it. And assuming they give you the thumbs up, then you'll be able to open up in 90 days. So, we expect the first micro businesses to start opening up beginning of next year. And, we really see there being a flurry of these since, it's, in my mind, a great opportunity for small business owners that And I know a lot that have been, eyeing this market for a year, 2 years, 3 years, and they just didn't have the money or didn't have the right criminal history to be able to get one. But the micro business kind of allows them to enter the market anyway.
So are you saying, I'm a defense attorney, obviously out of Mount Pleasant, Michigan. Are you saying if you have criminal history, it's not going to stop you from obtaining a micro-grow license? Because as it stands now, in regards to misdemeanors and felonies, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you're past 10 years on a felony and 5 on a misdemeanor, then you can still apply for pre-approval. There's still leeway within you can still get denied and appeal and get approved. But so what are you saying in regards to that?
So what we were told by the MRA during one of the rulemaking committee meetings was that the only disqualifying criminal charge will be selling a controlled substance to a minor. So absent that, anyone is allowed to apply to a micro business. So, if you were, say, applying under the MFLA, you had a controlled substance felony, then, you're out of luck. But with the micro business license and kind of the rec licenses generally, it's a little more favorable to people who maybe had some criminal history issues in the past.
That's good news. That's good news for a lot of people. And Craig, who are we talking with?
Well, this is Attorney Scott Roberts. This has been some great information. Unreal. Give your phone number and your website out again, Scott.
Yeah, so our website is scottrobertslaw.com. And our office number is 248-234-4060.
Right downtown in Detroit in the Masonic Temple building. So that's awesome.
Scott is by far one of the best of what he does out there, hands down. So be sure to look up Scott at scottrobertslaw.com. And Scott, you'll come back on the show here 3-4 weeks down the road when the rules and regulation comes out.
Yeah, definitely. Be very excited.
Love to have you back on a regular basis.
Todd, I hate to break the news to you, but the show is over. We got to go.
What are you talking about? I just got started talking to Scott. My voice is back. It's Memorial Day weekend. I'm attorney Todd L. Levitt. We got attorney Scott Roberts in the mothership. You're Craig Russell, the muscle. We have Motley Crue just turning it and burning it. Scott, again, thank you for being part of the show today and being in the mothership.
Thanks for having me on.
And Craig, we got to go. Is that right?
The show is over. The Coleman Veterans Memorial can't wait for us forever. Todd, we got to go.
Okay, I'm not just a litigator. I'm an advocator. Thank you, Scott Roberts, attorney at law. Take us out with some Motley Crue. See you next week.
The Todd L. Levitt Law Show, brought to you by Chad Mallywell Drilling of Rosebush, Clark Modular Homes, your most experienced and trusted builder in Mount Pleasant, Clear Vision Windows, Siding, Roofing, and Attic Installation of Midland, Mackinac Properties and Northern Michigan Vacation Rentals, buying, selling, and renting properties in the Straits of Mackinac region since 1998, Tim's Collision Plus in Roscommon, Harrison Power Sports, Central Michigan's fastest growing full-line Arctic Cat dealer, and Dr. Robert Townsend and Denali Healthcare for your alternative healthcare needs. Opinions expressed on this radio program do not necessarily reflect the views of this radio station.